We're going to sing a few songs out of the hymnal here. And we're going to start with page 208. This is a song we never really did sing in church, but some of us know it and we sing it ever so often. Great Judgment Morning, page 208. I dreamed that the great judgment morning had dawned and a trumpet had blown. I dreamed that the nations had gathered to judgment before the white throne. From the throne came a bright shining angel and stood on the land and the sea and swore with his hand raised to heaven that time was no longer to be. And oh, what a weeping and wailing as lost were told of their fate. They cried for the rocks and the mountains. They prayed, but their prayer was too late. The rich man was there, but his money had melted and vanished away. A pauper he stood at the judgment. His debts were too heavy to pay. The great man was there, but his greatness, when death came, was left far behind. The angel who opened up the records, not a trace of his greatness could find. And oh, what a weeping and wailing as the lost were told of their fate. They cried for the rocks and the mountains. They prayed, but the prayer was too late. The widow was there with the orphans. God heard and remembered their cries. No sorrows in heaven forever. God wiped all the tears from their eyes. The gambler was there with the drunkard and the man who had sold him the drink. With the people who gave him their license, together in hell they did sing. And oh, what a weeping and wailing as the lost were told of their fate. They cried for the rocks and the mountains. They prayed, but their prayer was too late. The mortal man came to the judgment, but his self-righteous rags would not do. The men who had crucified Jesus had passed off as mortal men too. The soul that had put off salvation, not tonight, I'll get saved by and by. No time now to think of religion, but at last he had found time to die. And oh, what a weeping and wailing as the lost were told of their fate. They cried for the rocks and the mountains. They prayed, but their prayer was too late. I want to sing page 89. Page 89 is a dear song and has been to me because, as you've heard in my other previous broadcasts, sermons, that my mother, when she heard her mom sing all the songs, such as Amazing Grace, Sweet By and By, such things that the hymnals throughout the house, this is the song Mom remembers the most that she sung of my Grandma Edna. There is coming a day when to judgment we'll go, there to reap as in life we have sown. Death eternal will reap if we sow to the flesh. Heaven's joys then will never ever be known. May we sow the righteous seed for the reaping, which is coming to everyone. Oh, the joy on that day when we hear Jesus say, "Come ye blessed, a crown you have won." Every day passing by, you are sowing the seed. Fruits of life or of death will bear. When you reap what you sow, to that land may you go, to that bright, happy home over there. May we sow the righteous seed for the reaping, which is coming to everyone. Oh, the joy on that day when we hear Jesus say, "Come ye blessed, a crown you have won." If you'd win life eternal, there's no time to lose. Look around you, the fields are wide. Go ye forth to the field, sow and reap the golden grain. Soon will fall the dark shadows of night. May we sow the righteous seed for the reaping, which is coming to everyone. Oh, the joy on that day when we hear Jesus say, "Come ye blessed, a crown you have won." Every act you perform is the seed to someone, for the influence will never die. Then be careful each day what you do, what you say, for you'll need it again by and by. May we sow the righteous seed for the reaping, which is coming to everyone. Oh, the joy on that day when we hear Jesus say, "Come ye blessed, a crown you have won." Let's sing verse 4 again. I love that verse. Every act you perform is a seed to someone, for the influence will never die. Then be careful each day what you do, what you say, for you'll need it again by and by. May we sow the righteous seed for the reaping, which is coming to everyone. Oh, the joy on that day when we hear Jesus say, "Come ye blessed, a crown you have won." Lately at work, that verse 4 keeps coming to my mind, and in those verses of that song, they're so powerful when you sit back and you just meditate upon them and how we ought to direct our lives for the Lord. If you have your Bibles, let's go to the book of Psalms, verse 44, or chapter 44, verse 1. Psalms 44, verse 1. We're going to talk about the mighty works of God. We have heard with our ears, O God of our fathers, O God, our fathers have told us what work thou didst in their days and in times of old. And notice what David had wrote down here and what he had remembered. The Bible is a book of so many things. And one of the things is the book of remembrance. And in the book of Revelations, we find what it is and I've talked to people about past and stuff like that, but the book of Revelations is basically what Revelation is past, present, future. What's in the past will be, and it will be in the future. You cannot escape one or the other. The definition of Revelation is past, present, future. And here, David is putting us in remembrance of what his father, Jesse, told him, and what his grandfather and great-grandfather had passed on to them. What are we passing on to the next generation and generations after us? Are we holding steadily to the Word of God? Or now has the Word of God become something just that we're unconcerned about now? Here, again, he said, we have heard with our ears, O God, our fathers have told us what works thou didst in their days, in the times of old. Now, perhaps there is no stories that stick by us so long as those which we heard of our childhood, those tales which are told by our fathers and our mothers, no doubt. Abraham, who talked to his young children about the flood and tell them how the waters overspread the earth and how Noah alone was saved in the ark. The ancient Israelis, when they were dwelled in the land, when they dwelled at their own land, would all of them tell their children about the Red Sea and the plagues which God wrought in Egypt when he brought his people out of the house of bondage? Among the early Christians, we know that it was a custom of parents to recount their children everything concerning the life of Christ and the acts of the apostles. So we know that. In the generation now that we are in, and the generation previous to us, and the generation that are staring at us right now, are we handing these things down to them? The wonderful stories that we have heard the Lord's of his ancient doings. We have heard that God has at times done so very mighty acts. The 10 plagues that were of the Passover, the plague of blood, how God turned water into blood, and they had them to drink blood. In the book of Revelations, and in our near future, they're talking about a war now. This is going to be the Third World War. And according to the book of Revelations, what Jesus passed on to John to pass on to us, this is what's going to happen in this war, this nuclear war. A third of everything is going to die. A third of the land is going to suffer and die. A third of the water supply is going to die out. A third of all the animals above the flocks, the birds, and the animals of the ground are going to die. Vegetation is going to suffer on account of this. Now I want you to understand about this, a third of the water supply. Later on, in the Great Tribulation, the last 3.5 years, there's going to be a meteorite fall from the sky called wormwood. And it's going to affect another part of the water supply. 1/3 of the water will be affected by that. And the people who will go drink of that will suffer. And they'll have lots of internal pains and stuff by suffering this. Now the funny thing, and I don't mean haha funny, but we have found recently a planet X, a 10th planet out from our solar system. And above all things that they have called it, this planet, they don't call it weapon or a planet X. They call it wormwood now. And I'm wondering right now, since this had happened according to the Bible, history and all, is it possible that there's a meteorite from that planet coming to us now? Throwing that out there. And then what's going to happen to the last part of the water supply? It is going to be turned to blood. In these times, in the book of Revelations, you'll be able to go to the water, your sink and everything, turn it on, and blood will come out. In Pharaoh's time, this happened. They had the water turned into blood. They had a plague of frogs. Frogs were everywhere. You couldn't move, you couldn't walk without frogs being in the places. It got so bad that this is the plague that Pharaoh went to Moses and told him that we want these things out of here right now. You know, they're in our beds, they're in our walkways. We can't walk, we can't move without these frogs going through this. And Moses said, okay, now when do you want this done? He said tomorrow. He said, okay, they'll be gone tomorrow. And he left. He should have told Moses, I want them gone before I get, or when I get to my palace, before I get to my palace. He had to spend another afternoon, he had to spend another night with these frogs. Instead of telling them, okay, if it's my decision, get them out of my kingdom right now. He turned around and he had his kingdom go through another night with these things. Now, going to a scientific theory thing, all that, I don't know if you guys have ever thought about it this way. Probably not. I have. This is the way my mind operates and thinks. But we are so big in cloning now. We're cloning and talking about cloning food and cloning things that we need to get by because the world's overpopulated. That's clone stuff. Here, God cloned frogs. Did you ever think about it? God cloned the frogs. And he didn't just do this. He did this for all these things. Gnats. They had a plague of gnats. They had a plague of wild beasts running through. They had a plague of pestilence. Now, you have to understand pestilence. Because in the book of Matthew 24, in our time, in our era right now, we have pestilence right now. They had, number 6, a plague of boils. Boils on the top of a man's head down to his feet. They had to scrape the boils off. A plague of hail. How many of you ever experienced a hailstorm? Where the water that fell is ice. And these plagues come. There's going to be a hailstorm in the book of Revelation that's so severe, it's going to not just damage cars, it's going to destroy cars, it's going to destroy homes, it's going to destroy buildings. They're going to fall so, and they're going to have the mass of a baseball. And you know how, if anybody has been hit by a fast pitch baseball, you know how severe that hurts. Could you imagine one falling from the sky and having no restraint at all, falling? Number 8, the plague of locusts. Now, out of all these plagues right now, this is probably the most, to me, in this, because when my dad was born in 1940, that was when the locusts were upon this earth. Now, locusts come every 7 years. And Dad had told me and my brother that when he was 7 years old, locusts was here. When he was 14 years old, locusts was here. When he was 21, locusts was here. And locusts always have one word. If you sit there and you listen, ever have listened to the locusts come around, they say just one word over and over, repeatedly. What is the word? Pharaoh. 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 Putting us back into remembrance of what God did to the Egyptians and to Pharaoh. He didn't just bring these plagues upon Pharaoh and Egypt. It went as far as Pharaoh dying. Pharaoh's heart was so stubborn, it was so wicked, it was so full of himself, thinking that he is a god and he could override the God of the Hebrews. He went and he challenged God, more or less, at the Red Sea. When the Red Sea parted and he seen the Hebrews over on the other side, the Israelis on the other side, he said, okay, man, let's go. We're going to go over. Tempting God. You're not tempting God and get away with it. No man can tempt God and get away with it. Pharaoh here thought himself to be God, a God himself, the God of his nation, of his Egyptian nation, and he ran his chariot straight through into the Red Sea, and God let them get so far, and he closed the walls. And Pharaoh's dead carcass floated out to the sea. The plagues of darkness. It got so dark, man couldn't see in front of him. And again, in the book of Revelations, the sun for 6 months will refuse to shine. Could you imagine 6 months of total darkness? And the last thing here was the plague of the firstborn. All the people, all the kids, the firstborn, male-factored boys died. And that's where the Pentecost thing came, where they had to go out and put blood over the doorpost. And the death angel came, which was God, by the way. And he said, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. We have that song in our songbooks. When I see the blood, I will pass over you. In closing, we're going to go through these 17 questions. God sat down with a man named Job in Job chapter 38, and he asked Job these questions. And as I go through these here in about a minute or two, I'm going to ask you to go through this and look at it like Job right now. The book of Job is the only book in the Bible that is misplaced. You find the book of Job right next to the book of Psalms. It doesn't belong in the right next to the book of Psalms. Matter of fact, it probably wouldn't fit anywhere in the Bible, but it's somewhere, for some reason, it's in the Bible. The book of Job was the first book ever written. Before Moses put pen to paper, or however he did it, stone tablet or whatever, and wrote the book of Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Job was written before that time, before Moses wrote that. This book was written back in the Samaritan times and the Ethiopian times. I never pronounced it, not even when I was a kid. This was the Bronze Era. This was before anything could really be actually written down. This book was written. This is the only book in the Bible where it talks about dinosaurs. The great beast upon the land, it says. Other than that, you never hear that in the book of Genesis. Just think about that. So this is the first book that was ever written. And I'll recap real fast. Satan goes through this land at that time. And he comes up to God in the kingdom after he's been thrown out. He comes to God in the kingdom. I want you to understand that he comes to God, and he comes to God talking about his children upon this earth. He talked to him about Job. He's like, have you considered my friend Job? You let me take everything away that you've given him. And he'll curse you to your face. He'll curse you. No, not my servant Job. What do you think God and Satan ever sit down and talk to you about? Has he talked to you about? There's only two people in that book that said that. That was Satan, and that was Job's wife. She came out to Job and he's in boils and cutting himself, getting the boils off him, and he's sitting there. Really, Job was in such a depressed state, right? How depressed have you ever been? Think of the most depressed place you've ever been in your life. Job was there. And she looked at Job and said, curse God and die. This is a curse God and die. Get it over with. He looked at her and said, the Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. You think about that statement. And here, God turns around and he sits Job down toward the end in the 38th chapter, and these 17 questions come to Job. And as God is telling Job this now, I'm going to read these, and I want you to think about this. I want you to consider this, what God's telling Job. Number one, God told Job, have you set the time that the sun will rise? Have you created the day break? All right, guys, let's put this home. Have you set the time? I want you to understand something about God. First off, God created time. Time didn't create God. God created time. I want you to understand something. In heaven, I want to get this through your thick skulls. In heaven, there is no time. There is no time. Don't exist. In the New Jerusalem, where the Gentiles are going, there is no time. There is no such thing as time. On the new earth, the one that the Jews are going to inherit, there is no time. You can go anywhere you want to. In heaven, in the galaxies, in the multi-universes, you can go anywhere. And there is no time. Time don't exist. God created time for us. Outside of this earth, time don't exist. When you go to heaven, there's not going to be a Monday. There's not going to be a Tuesday. There ain't going to be a Wednesday. There ain't going to be a Thursday. There ain't going to be a Friday. There's going to be one endless day, and that one endless day has no name to it. Where was you when I created time? Did you create time? How did you create time? He's telling Job. Where did you tell the sun to rise? Have you ever looked and kept record, or even kept, like the past few days? What time does the sun set, or what time does the sun rise? Have you ever noticed the sun never rises the same time every day? Have you noticed that? Now, who did that? It wasn't evolution. Have you created the daybreak? Where's the time? Where's the time of day where the day breaks? You know, from the night to day, then day to night. Number 2, have you discovered how the oceans are kept full? Take a look at the oceans. We got 2 major oceans, the Atlantic and the Pacific. How is it that they always stay full? They never empty. How is it possible? Number 3, have you walked in the depths of the sea, of the seas? Have you ever walked way down deep in the depths of the seas? Now we have people that have these water gear and the scuba divers, and they go down and they go all the way down to the depths of the sea and everything. And they see what's down there. Civilizations has come and gone. But Job never did. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have scuba diver outfit. They couldn't. Did you know that in Job's time they couldn't swim? They didn't know what swimming was. Do you realize when God created the flood and the flood happened, that nobody in Noah's time knew how to swim? They all drowned because they didn't know how to swim. Number 4, do you know what death is like? Do you know what death is like? I want to ask everybody listening to this, do you know what death is like? Have you experienced death? Death comes in different forms, and we never realize it. We are susceptible to death, and we never see it. For example, I'm going to give you one quick example. Take today. Today is going to turn into tomorrow, isn't it? So what's going to happen today? It's going to be a thing of the past. Death is going to come in the form of darkness tonight and take today away. Tomorrow you'll wake up and it ain't going to be today. It's going to be tomorrow. We'll call it today because today will be yesterday. But death comes in all stages, and we just don't realize it. Have you ever, do you know what death is like? What is death, Job? Ezekiel put it plain, and there are some of the most scariest verses I found in the book of Ezekiel. That death is a separation of soul and body. You take the soul out of the body and the soul will live because it's created of God. but the body will not live. It will not, it cannot. This is all that we see when we live here upon this earth. This is what we've come accustomed to. When this is gone, the soul is gone out of the body. Life, it's gone out of this body. And it is laid there as clay, dead, alone. What is death like? Okay, Job, what's death like? What's death like to you? Number 5. Do you know what lies beyond death? Have you seen it? What lies behind death? Job, have you personally seen it? There's only 2 options we have heard, but we have never experienced it. We hear about heaven and we hear about hell in between. I will grant you, if people was to experience what life is out of death, they'd never be the same. There are books that I've seen in the hospitals, 14 minutes in heaven, 14 minutes in hell, I think. It'd be like a lifetime. Could you imagine 14 minutes in heaven, 14 minutes in hell? I'll never forget, I don't remember the message my Uncle Hubert preached, but I'll never forget him preaching this part in the message. He said, if this side was to go 30 minutes up into heaven, and this side would go to hell for 30 minutes, and you guys would come back and change your lives. You'd never be the same. I want you to think about that. How could you ever be the same once you've looked into heaven, or looked into hell, or looked into both? What is it like? Paul told the Corinthian church in Corinthians chapter 15, verse 19, if we above all men have hope in this present life, we're above all men most miserable. There have to be something more out of this. If we only have hope in this present life, we're miserable. Because we live this life and we're like, what else is there? Number 6. Have you comprehended the vastness of the earth? Have you ever comprehended the vastness, the depths, the height, the weight, everything of the earth? Number 7. Where does light live? Where does it dwell? Where does light live? Where does it dwell? It has to have a place where it dwells. It has to have a home. Where does light dwell? Where does light live? Where does life get its source of energy? Where does light come from? Number 8. Where does darkness live? Where is its resting place? Number 9. Do you know the path to the home of light and darkness? Do you know the path of the homes of light and darkness? Number 10. Are you old enough to have seen these things where alive when this all began? Where was the beginning of all this? Who instructed, who made this stuff to happen? And why? What was the principle or principles or reason or reasons behind me doing this, Job? I love this. Oh man, number 11, I love this. Do you know how many snowflakes are scheduled to fall on the earth? Do you know how many snowflakes are scheduled to fall upon the earth? Have you ever noticed also that there is no snowflake that is alike? Number 12. Have you seen the storehouses of hell that is ready for the day of battle and war? You know what hell is? We just talked a little bit about it. You know, storehouses. They got storehouses of this, of the battle and war coming. Of battle and war. Number 13. How does light travel to the ends of the earth? How does light travel to the ends of the earth? To what ends? Where does it? Where's the starting point? Where's the ending point of it? Lightning shines how? Does anybody in here know how lightning travels? Where does it go from? It comes from the east to the west. Never does it go. Have you ever thought about it? Never does it go north to south. Never. It always goes east to west. And you know what's so special about the east? Does anybody know what's so special about the east? In Jesus' time, and even all through history, when the king comes, he comes where? From what direction does the king come? All the time. He comes generally from the east. Do you know when we are buried, what direction are we facing? Why is it that we are facing east? For the most part. Why are we facing east? It's because when God comes, he comes from the east. Isn't that what we've always been taught? The eastern skies. Number 14. Who is man or the Son of Man that he could answer such questions? Who is man or the Son of Man that he can answer such questions as these? Number 15. Do you know what foundation was attached to? Do you know what foundation was attached to? What was the cornerstone of this? Where's the foundation at? Number 16. Do you know who it was that laid the cornerstone? Who laid the cornerstone? Evolutionists say that there's no cornerstone because nobody was here to lay it. So it just happened. But here God is saying to Job, do you know who laid the cornerstone? Who laid the cornerstone for earth? Who made the earth when the earth was first made? Who did this? It wasn't evolution. Who did this? Number 17. Who was it that determined how much water the oceans would have? Who was it that determined how much waters the oceans would have? So what do you think now? The Atlantic and the Pacific Ocean, just those two? Could it be they don't have the same? One has to have more than the other at times? These 17 questions God asked Job in chapter 30, in chapter 38, just blows your mind. And you think to yourself, evolution, there's no such thing. There can't be no such thing as evolution. And you have to think God had to be here. There's no other possible reason for this but that right now. That God has to be doing that. So I hope this has been an education and helpful to you, and that you could see the wonderful works of God, and to see it more clearly, and see that we need to focus on this stuff and tell our children and our children's children, like Joel told us, to tell our children to the third generation of the coming of the King.